Are you ready to take your brand global? If so, this episode is going to be for you because with shifting tariffs, tightening wallets, and wildly unpredictable global markets, expanding a retail business across borders is going to be a pretty high stakes game these days. But we're going to talk about how to play that game to win, to conquer international growth and scale up without betting the company on a wrong move. So welcome to Retail OCD. We are operators who've spent our careers inside retail and we're still obsessed with it. I'm Deanne Campbell, the maestro of store design, operations, and customer experience strategy.
And I'm Barney Stacher. I'm the Chief Conversational Officer here at Retail OCD, and I talk about the intersection of technology and human beings.
Today, we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by two people who've spent their careers helping businesses cross borders successfully, both literally and strategically. We have Renee Hartman, who runs CLA, which is a global consultancy really focused on growth, which is what we're talking about today, and helping companies navigate into the US market. And she is also an executive partner at Pilot Light, which is a growth accelerator specifically for global CPG brands. And for the past 13 years, Renee has been on the Europe Regional Advisory Board at Duke Fuqua School of Business. So Renee really knows what she's talking about. And if that wasn't enough, we also have Marcus Wang, who's a partner and co-founder at Coda Global Ventures. And Marcus is a Harvard-trained attorney, which is always impressive to strike fear into the heart of anyone when he walks into a room. And he is an attorney who has really turned into entrepreneurship, who's built a business from New York all the way to Beijing to London. And he has most memorably taken Under Armour's China business from zero to an $80 million operation in just 3 years. And Renee and Marcus both worked side by side on that project. So between the two of them, we have a really rare ground level view of what it really takes to grow a business internationally. So Renee, Marcus, welcome.
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah, I feel lucky because I know all of you guys, right? So Deanne and Barney, I know from Rethink Retail, and Marcus and I go way back, I think 15 years. We met in China. So I feel very happy to have a good group here.
Exactly. And we're so thrilled.
Deanne, Barney, thanks for having us on here. And I'm so thrilled to be here with my good friend, Renee. We worked together, like she said, 15 years ago in China. We built something very special there. And I'm so happy to be with her here again.
Very cool.
Well, I'd love to start just by getting a little bit of background on the two of you. Give us a little bit of we'll start, Renee, with you, just a 60-second. How did you end up doing cross-border work? I know you're both Americans. You're both living abroad, which is, I think, credibility personified for what you do. How did you end up doing this? How did you end up leaving the US? Well, that may be too long a story, and just tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in retail and retail tech for about 30 years. I first started out in finance. I used to work at Putnam Investments covering the retail sector. I spent some time in Ogilvy and Mather, and first in San Francisco during the dot-com boom. And actually what brought me to China is I moved over to China and started the Chinese dot-com boom. So we started working with Chinese companies who are going public on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange. So I worked on the first Chinese company to list on NASDAQ way back in 2000. So spent some time in Beijing then, went back to business school at Duke. And then I went back to China and met a bunch of guys who were former Nike guys and started up an apparel brand. So that was kind of I would say that was sort of my crash course into retail. I was COO and it was just figure everything out, open up stores. We opened up 25 stores. We had to, I had to build all the POS systems, learn how to merchandise, work in the factories, learn all the HR parts of it. So got a lot of scars along the way. And that was a great way. I spent about 8 years just running that and got to really understand retail from the ground up. And then since then, I've been working on a lot of cross-border. I moved back to the US for 10 years and did a lot of global expansion, which a lot of it was US, Europe to Asia and vice versa. And then about 4 years ago, I moved to Portugal. And I'm still doing a lot of international, but these days, I think we're seeing a lot more of Europe companies going into the US, but US coming to Europe, and actually a lot of China coming outside of China. Whereas I used to do all going into China, it's kind of flipped now. So I've been through a lot of different versions of it. It was more than 60 seconds, but.
No, but that's okay. It's interesting. The ebb and flow, I mean, there is a back and forth to it. At one
Yeah.
point, like, it's coming our way. Another time it's going their
Yeah.
way. So,
Yeah, and we don't fine for overtime.
yeah.
Marcus, what about you?
Yeah.
Well, it's good you don't find because she's going to pay you in euros because she's sitting over in
Well,
Europe.
euros can be more valuable
More,
than
come on.
dollars these days.
You can pay in pounds, so you get you win.
That's true. That's true. I do sit in London right now. I sit here in London. I'm very fortunate because my wife was born and raised here. My children are British. They mock me for my unrefined, untutored American accent. We live near a place called Ealing Broadway. And my 5-year-old always tells me, say, Dad, it's Ealing Broadway, not Broadway. It's just because you sound like a Texas rattlesnake. I said, well, thank you very much. I'm from Baltimore, actually, but they can't tell the difference yet. But no, I have had my entire career based on international, cross-border, what really drives me to bring people together. I think business ties outlast political fluctuations. I think it's so important because you've been abroad, you've been in all these different countries. You see that what unites us is greater than what divides us. We need to come together. And one of the greatest ways to do that is through retail, through pop culture, through economic interchange. Chambers of commerce are usually the greatest drivers of prosperity, growth, and global unity that you'll find. So right now I sit as a partner in Coveted Global Ventures. We're London-based. We do cross-border strategy investment advisory, primarily in AI-powered digital health, but also we work with retail. We work with many other different sectors. As Deanne, as you said, I'm an attorney. I'm still a licensed attorney in New York. I began my career, very fortunately, at DLA Piper in Manhattan, doing hedge fund formation, restructuring, international corporate M&A. And I transitioned from there to Under Armour. I was very fortunate to be hired by Kevin Plank, the founder of Under Armour, who hired me to break open the China market. At the time, Under Armour was the biggest story in America. It was the hottest brand ever, but it was virtually unknown, had a zero footprint in China. He hired me, sent me some suitcases, told me to go on my way and make it happen. I was the first and only guy out there for a while, but I was very fortunate to work with great partners like Renee and others and to really turn into a success. And after Under Armour, I went back to the United States. I founded and exited a biotech genetics testing company called Zytogen, a proprietary platform for embryo sequencing, for testing embryos before they were transferred to IVF to optimize selection to make sure we had healthy and successful pregnancies. We ran that, we were profitable in 2 years, ran it successfully for 10 years and exited in 23. After that, I did time in government. Makes it sound like I was in jail, I know. Sometimes it felt that way. I'm just joking.
Right.
I had a really wonderful time. I was very fortunate to be appointed as the head of economic and workforce development for Baltimore County to bring investment, to bring jobs, to bring growth. We drove commercial permit value up by 41%, cut approval times by 50%. We wanted to make the community better for business and for the people who live there. And I was very fortunate to do that. Since then, I've moved to London with my family. And now we work with founders, we work with investors, international businesses on cross-border strategy, on capital deployment and market entry across the globe.
I have a thought about this cross-border work, which is for retailers at least. And the experience of Under Armour over there would be interesting because a lot of retailers think about it as a global distribution decision, but it's really a translation problem, a cultural problem, right? And I don't know if you recently heard of the Starbucks promotion on Truck Day and its whole implications there.
Tank Day.
Tank Day, not Truck Day. Thank you, Tank Day. And I wonder if you'd speak to that experience of you going over and really having to translate everything that was happening for you in the US to doing it in China.
Absolutely. Renee, you remember we were talking the other day about 250 and the green caps. So we were doing Under Armour. We did a visual merchandising and people said, all right, we have a great selection of headwear in the United States. We were trying to sell our different colorways. And one of them was a beautiful green baseball cap. And I told the folks on the team, I said, look, we can't sell that in China because in China, wearing a green cap for a man is equivalent to putting horns on your head. Remalts means my wife is cheating on me. You don't want to wear that. You don't want to sit in the cup chair. You need to take your head off. You can't sell it in China. And there's little cultural things, but they make a big difference, as you saw with the Starbucks Tank Day, or you saw the Lululemon, as if they haven't made enough mistakes in their time, but they put the Japanese taiko drum on top of the tower in China. And that was probably one of the dumbest things. And I can't believe nobody told them that would be a bad idea to do that.
I mean, that's what I think is interesting about this. Like they always come down to these little things, right? They had like Lululemon, they were trying to do something on the Great Wall recently. And they had, they're trying to do this big homage to Chinese culture. And they just hired somebody to bring a drum and they put the Lululemon logo on the drum. And sure, nobody thought about it, right? Like it wasn't an intentional thing of we're doing this to disrespect China. It wasn't any of that. It's these little details that I think sometimes you just need somebody there to kind of translate that. And, Marcus and I, like one of the things when Under Armour first went into China, one of the things that we got to do that was pretty fun is we went back to Baltimore and we went through there, all of the showrooms in Baltimore. We pulled the merchandise together for the first store in China. And it was funny because when we first went there, I remember, the people in the US were like, okay, it's China. Everybody is like very conservative. They want to wear turtlenecks. They want long sleeve shirts. They want to be like, and then we went there and we're like, no, they want to wear like the cute aerobics outfits. They want to show skin. Like it was this just idea of like, we have this perception of what China would like. We have this perception of what people would like. Therefore, we're even going to change the merchandise for that. So I think it's this idea of how do you adapt to the culture and really understand what they want? And then how do you translate your brand into it? Because so Under Armour, at the time, like China is so different when Under Armour went in back then, because it used to be Adidas and Nike and these guys, they had huge footprints in China, but it was really fashion led. It was sportswear, but it was a very fashion led. And Under Armour is so performance. So Under Armour came in there kind of like, rah, like this, we're like this, even I remember like the voicemail at Under Armour was like a huddle. Like it's really, aggressive. Like strong.
I got videos. I trained everyone. I didn't just drink the Kool-Aid, Barney. I made the Kool-Aid. I made everybody do it. We had to work out together. Renee, were you around for this story? When if you were late to one of my meetings, I would make you do 10 push-ups for every meeting you're late. And then Kevin Plank,
I just quit already.
well, then our CEO himself, who's in great shape, but he was late to a meeting. He was 2 minutes late. Now, in his defense, he had just flown in from America, so he had a good excuse. But I went outside. I said, look, boss, man, you can find me afterwards, but I have to maintain consistency. Sure. You're 2 minutes late. You owe me 20 push-ups. Is that okay? And he was a great sport. He said, of course. He walks in. He said, I'm 2 minutes late. Yeah. I followed the rules. He dropped and did 20. And that was so impressive to the retail staff and everyone else, because they very much respect hierarchy in China. And they looked at this billionaire CEO, and he got on the floor and gave us 20. And that was part of the culture we're trying to teach.
Well, it's also interesting the fact that you just mentioned that, Renee, that the culture there, the expectation of let's sell them what we think the Chinese want.
Yeah.
And what it really was is this is an American performance brand, and it's aspirational for the Chinese to want to, isn't that really what it is?
I think it's a really good point. It's something that everybody, I think, wavers between, right? Which is like, how much do you sell the brand and what the core of it and it is, and then how much do you adapt locally, right? And it's a fine line of like, how do you get too far one way? You can definitely go too far down the way where you lose the core of the brand, and then you can do it not enough where you're not connecting with people on like an authentic level or something that means something to them. So I think it's a huge balancing act, and every brand I think has to do it in a different way. And I've seen people go wrong on both ends, right? You let too much go, it can get out of control and you lose your brand. And on the flip side, there's so many stories of brands who go into other markets, they don't adapt and they die, right? It's funny, an example, I was just in London last week, and I don't know, Marcus, if you saw the Viore stores there. There's a couple new Viore stores, and I love Viore. Like, I'm a huge fan of it. And I was so excited because I was like, oh, Fiore's here. It's amazing. And all the British people were with them. I'm like, never heard of it. No idea what that is. And I was like, it's Southern California lifestyle. And they're like, I don't know. Don't get it. Looks like Lululemon. So it's like even something like that where you have to translate, because you got to bring the culture, right? And so I know Viore because I'm from the US. I get it. I understand the culture. But if you're someone fresh going in, you don't know anything, and just go into a white store with a bunch of workout gear, it does look like Lululemon, right? You didn't tell the story. So I think part of it is when you go overseas, you have to work a little harder, and you have to tell your story and make it come to life in the store, because you have to assume nobody's ever heard of you. And I think a lot of brands, especially the successful ones, and Under Armour maybe had a little bit of this back in the day, which is they're so proud of what they've done in their home market. They're so successful in their home market that there is a little bit of that hubris of like, people know me, I'm popular, I did this before, I've done well. And it takes some humility, I think, to go into a new market and assume nobody knows you, even US to UK, which is same language, right? It's still, a lot of times people don't know it.
Two nations divided by common language is the US and UK. We discovered that with the folks we work with. But you're absolutely right, Renee. In China, like I said at the time, Under Armour was the hottest thing in the world. Everybody would have killed just to sweep the floors at Under Armour headquarters. Yeah. And I'm not even exaggerating about that. We go to China, and it was a very humbling experience because in China, they had Nike, they had Adidas, the biggest brands were already dominant there. There's a huge footprint. They have the retail stores, the big endorsements and everything. And Under Armour was so niche that nobody knew who we were. We walked in and people said, who are you? Why does your logo, the UA, look like a Chanel logo on its side? And if it's Chanel, then Mr. Wang, you don't look refined enough to work for Chanel. So what's going on here? What's the story? And we're so proud of this American brand, this all-American, tough core performance brand. And then, as Renee said, you had to talk to the local consumers. You adjust to their tastes. You had to communicate with them, not sacrifice who you are, and cater to blatantly. At the same time, if you go in arrogantly and you say, I know what I have and you should just buy what we have, it's not going to work. So it's a tightrope to walk. And then China, of course, people always say China is X or China is Y, but really China is not any of those things because China is many regions, many different people. The consumer that you find in Shanghai is different than the consumer in Beijing or in other areas of the country. And the consumer you had in 2010 is very different from the consumer you have in 2026. So times are changing. If you don't evolve, you'll die. And if you look at what Nike's doing, they had 7 consecutive quarters of negative growth in China. They're not doing well in China. Under Armour has faced tremendous headwinds in China. They're not doing very well there either. Adidas is doing really well. And part of that is Adidas not only produces, everyone manufactures. They not only manufacture the majority of their products, 97% in China, they design over 60, 70% in China. The local teams are in charge. So there's a phrase that goes viral on the internet, on Weibo, on the Chinese Twitter. They got a t-shirt coming out with that next week. They know how to respond and react and adapt. And so they still, in the era of Chinese brands coming up, Adidas is still able to carve out a successful niche there, more than niche.
Yeah, localization and pivot is that speed.
Yeah.
For scale now is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think speed is such an interesting, I think that's a lesson that a lot of people learn from Shein, right? That was the first way people heard about it, is how can you quickly adapt? And I think, Shein was the front end of it, but I think actually that's one of the things that when you look at China right now, there's some amazing innovation coming out of China, and especially on the brand side. And what they're able to do is they change so fast. They're able to move so quickly. And I think that is something that it's something that has always been difficult for retail to do. And it's becoming more and more important now, because I think the way, the pace of change with consumer preferences, with shopping preferences, with anything, kind of just trends that are happening and how quickly things go, you have to react so quickly. And I think that is something that, China is a good place for, regardless of whether people are going there or not. I think every brand should be looking at what they're doing from an innovation standpoint. And there's one example, there's a beauty brand that's come out. That's a new beauty brand called Herbie. And the woman who founded it, she worked at L'Oreal for ages. She's Chinese. She lived in Paris for a long time. She worked at L'Oreal for a long time. And she got to know the playbook. She's like, okay, I know how luxury does this stuff, right? And so she went back to China and she went to the factory and she said, I don't want the cheap stuff. I want the best you can give me. The most expensive ingredients you can give me, the most expensive formulation, the most expensive packaging. And I'm going to make this luxury, but I'm going to do it in a way that's unique and different. And so they've learned, I think people have learned the playbooks. It's not just race to the bottom of whatever's cheap. It's how do you do something really fast, innovative, and new, and iterate so quickly that you're able to tap on these trends really quickly. And that's something I think everyone is behind on.
Well, I think another problem is supply chain. I know with Target, they didn't figure out their supply chain before they went into Canada. And Canadians, I'm Canadian, my mother and my sister are still in Canada. They were so looking forward to Target coming in, all these cool things that they can't get in Canada. They hear about them, the Target experience. Target came in and it was awful because they had Canadian products on the shelf. Well, Canadians can get those all day long.
Right.
And they had none of the cool stuff that they've been looking forward to. And that's why they failed.
Yeah, I think that's right. Supply chain is, I think, one of the number one things that people are having to figure out these days, right? Part of it is being quick to adapt. Part of it is tariffs and all of that kind of stuff. But it's complicated. And I do think you're right. That is a big piece of it. And even things one of the lessons I always remember is Marks and Spencer came into China market and Hong Kong. And they first came in with British sizing. And the British sizing is completely off in China. So even things like when you think about Nike and Adidas, they have different lasts for China. The foot, it's different, right? So you've got to do everything that's localized for that. And that takes a whole new supply chain, right? Design, production, shipping, all of that is completely new. And you do have to do that to make it work.
Everything is bigger in America. I just bought a king-size bed here in England. And guess what? This so-called king-size bed is the size of an American queen-size bed. I was very disappointed.
Right.
It's a very different.
There's no California king.
And only 25% of the French have air conditioning right now, and it's
Right.
only 11 degrees.
I
So
guess you
No-
can't get ranch dressing, evidently, either.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. Well, it's funny,
So-
like how much is cultural. Because like another, like you just mentioned the air conditioning. Like when I first came to Portugal, I remember I was like, there's one thing I really want, which is just, I want a clothes dryer. Like everybody here will hang their clothes up. And I'm like, I just can't handle that. I'm too American for that. I need the soft clothes. And so I got it. And I thought like, oh, this is going to be this huge luxury. And it's like, it costs like 200 euros. It's not expensive. It's the same as a washer. Anybody could get it. It's not that it's luxurious, but you talk to people here and they're like, oh, I don't like clothes in the dryer. They're too soft. They're like, I want a crunchy towel. And then other people feel like it's bad for the clothes. So it is just cultural. Like it's not like it's not available. It's not that it's too expensive. It's just people don't like it, and there's just different ways of looking at it.
Habit, culture. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it.
I have a question about the manufacturing, the supply chain as it relates to a company like Under Armour, which is working in performance fabrics, right? New stitching and manufacturing technologies, and the fact that China, whether it's for manufacturing technologies, has invested in a certain level of quality and speed and flexibility that we don't have over here. And that seems to also be happening in the technology of the retail experience too, even at their brick and mortar stores. So as you said, Marcus and Renee, they learned from us and now we're learning from them.
Yeah.
which I think is a great thing. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of folks who frame that as a negative, like, oh, they're learning, we're learning. The more learning that happens, the better. I think we're all one people, no matter what country you have been born in. And it's only to the benefit of all the businesses, all the people of the world, all the consumers, to our point of retail, if we are able to take advantage of better procedures, better supply chains, better quality all across the board. So it's true. And one of the things we've seen in this whole tariff war is that, a lot of companies said we need to pursue a new ABC strategy, anything but China. We have to get out of China because of the tariffs. And if you see what's going on, there are a couple issues. Number one, you simply can't get the same level of quality because it's not fungible. The knowledge is not fungible. The supply chains, the infrastructure. When certain companies have relocated out of China into, say, Vietnam, Vietnam doesn't have the depth and the breadth of expertise or the length of experience, and the quality control is abysmal. And you've seen cases where companies who have 90% pass rates are falling to 50% because they just can't get their things out of Vietnam or India or Bangladesh. They can't replicate it. Or when they do replicate it, what are they doing? They're hiring a bunch of Chinese folks to go set up in those other countries for them and run it for them. So there is an issue where it really isn't feasible to move these out. And that isn't to say that we shouldn't be trying to rebuild our manufacturing capacity in America. We absolutely should. We should bring a lot of jobs back, but it's not going to be that easy. And it's going to be harder not just to compete on cost, but on quality and technology. They have the dark factories that we've seen in China, where it's so automated, they don't even have the lights on in the factory because it's all robotics. And the robots are building cars, they're assembling electronics, they're doing all the work that you don't even need lights on. So it's going to be very hard for us to catch up if we don't make a concerted effort to do so.
I just actually, right before this, I was talking to a woman who runs a robotics software company out of London. Marcus and I were just talking about robotics earlier, this area of how fast China is exceeding everybody else in robotics. So she was doing warehouse automation. And I was asking the question of she works a lot of Chinese robotics companies. And I said, what do you think is it? What are they doing that's so different? What's so innovative that's happening in China? And she said, it really just comes down to outlook. Like people in China are just, they're embracing it and they're going behind it. And it's seen as something that's good to do. There was an article, I don't know if you guys saw it in the New York Times, maybe a couple of weeks ago. It was about China's view of AI versus American view of AI from a public perception. And it was like the US in general, there's a little bit of fear. It's going to take my job. Is it good for the kids? Whereas in China, it's been this embrace. Like, you know what? We're not worried about taking our jobs. We're just going to basically say, this is going to make us all better. Let's do it. Let's be the best with it. Right. And I think robotics has been the same. And so it's like a lot of it is mentality, right? To a certain extent. And there is this idea of just embracing the technology and moving forward. And who knows, maybe there'll be ramifications of that. I'm not saying it's all good, but it does make everybody, I think, just get there a lot faster.
Renee, I mean, just to piggyback, you're absolutely right. And they talked about why AI is seen so positive in China, because it's enhanced their quality of life. It's made things faster, safer, more transparent. There's less corruption. So there's so many things. Public safety has been enhanced. And they also look at AI as everyone worries about privacy. They have privacy concerns there too, but they've also seen the courts protect them. There's a case recently in the news where the guy was asked to train AI and then they fired him so AI could take his job. And the court in China ruled that you couldn't do that. You couldn't have someone do that. And so there are protections he put in place. One of the top thinkers in the government recently announced, he said, look, we cannot have AI replace people. We can't have work that doesn't have workers and workers that don't have work. That's just not going to work for society. You have to stop that. So people are optimistic in a way that I'm afraid people in the West, young people especially, are complete opposite.
Does China have a better social safety net?
Yeah, I mean, China does. There is a much better social safety net. One of the things with China about privacy is like you kind of give that up, to a certain extent. Like there's a lot more facial recognition. You don't really have a choice as a general person. So to be honest, like that privacy piece is kind of taken off the table to a certain extent, and people have just sort of accepted that. And it's something that is just the way things are. So I think there is a difference around that. And I mean, Europe's another example too, where there's a pretty like strong social safety net here. There's pros and cons to each one of them, right? Because I think one of the comments in Europe is that I think people feel like technology is not developing fast enough here because of all the regulations, right? And because there are different ways to do it. Now, you can argue all of this all day long. I think but at the end of the day, I do think like from a tech perspective, US and China for sure are the ones that are leading the charge among both of them. But I think that does definitely play into your perception of whether AI is going to take your job, not take your job. And I've got a 17-year-old, and it's like, I talk to a lot of people at that age, and all the parents I talk to, like every time I ask someone, what are they studying? They say like, oh, they're doing nursing because they think AI is not going to take the job, or they're doing this because they're not sure how AI is going to displace it. So I feel like it's such a big thing of like, this is like how you're picking what you're going to major in, how you're picking your career is based on an underlying fear of AI taking your job, which is very different than when we were all growing up, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I wouldn't say the one system is better than the other. I think it really boils down to how do we define freedom? If you're an American, you define the freedom as the freedom to do what you want to do, the freedom to speak how you want to speak, to pursue the life you want to pursue, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nothing should get in the way of that. We see AI as infringing on that, taking away our privacy, taking away, so many different things. That's not a good thing. So of course, in America, we're going to see AI as bad. China doesn't view freedom the same way. In China, freedom is freedom from what? Freedom from fear. You look at the last few hundred years of history in China, the greatest fear, some brigands or bandits can come burn down your house, kill everyone in your family, burn down your city. They don't want that. In China, you want the freedom to go about your business, to earn money, to take care of your family, never have to worry about it. So the government and they have worked together to deliver safety to them. There are viral videos where you can leave your luxury handbag in the middle of a major city thoroughfare, come back 2 hours later, nobody will touch it. Partially culturally, and partially because carrot and stick. If someone takes it, and they've had instances where AI cameras will find you and they will punish you. So people feel, hey, I have the freedom from what? Freedom from fear. I can go about my daily life. I can earn a living. I don't have to worry about things. AI is great. So it's a very different perspective. And again, it depends on where you sit. I wouldn't say one's better than the other, but they're both great for their respective systems.
Oh, what a great perspective. Speaking of jobs, though, I'm kind of wondering, going back to the cross-border expansion, Under Armour, for example, or any business really expanding, how do you decide how many of your own American people to bring with you? What is the right mix? I mean, you need people who know the brand. So there's an amount of American people that have to come with you, or Chinese people who have to come into America, for example. But you also need people who understand the local culture, who are local employees, because you have an obligation and really a benefit of employing as many locals as possible. What is the right way to go about determining what that mix might be?
I think if I'll start with that for Under Armour, because we've done it, and I've done it not just for Under Armour, for other companies as well, going into China and other jurisdictions. The most important thing is when it comes to China, right now is a good time. Because right now you have a population in China that is very international, very global. They speak English. You understand global norms, they have a global education, which means you don't have to overinvest in bringing expats and foreigners into the country. You have a population that's much easier to get on board with your culture, to train up to your corporate culture and represent you in a way that works. Back in 2010, it was a little bit harder because especially something as ultra-American as Under Armour, it's going to be very foreign. We work very, very hard. I spent a lot of my time trying to convey those values. So for example, even in a store, if you walked in the mall, like Renee and I would go to the mall, the Nike store, and the person standing there would just be very diffident, look at you and be like, yeah, welcome, fine, go on. You get what you want, and then you buy it, and they couldn't care less. because they're retail workers. It's not a big deal. So I told them, I said, we need brand ambassadors. I changed all their titles. I took them on a retreat. No one had ever taken retail workers on a corporate retreat before. I took them on a corporate retreat. I invested in all of them. And I said, we're going to go through this whole process. And I'm going to let you understand, you're an ambassador. Everything you do represents a brand, because you don't get a second chance at a first impression. And we're landing in this country. The most important thing we do is differentiate ourselves and tell our brand story and communicate our brand values to the consumer population. So you have to stand up straight. You have to communicate energy, positivity, vibes. Do that shout, do that whole, not to be too aggressive. You have to be a little Chinese. You have to be Chinese still, but you have to convey to the consumer that this is a different experience. When they walk in, I said, look, figure out what they want, confirm what they want, and fulfill those needs, take care of them, let them feel good about who they are. It's not just a shirt, because to be perfectly frank, you all know this, they're all just shirts. You can get a great shirt from any brand. You don't have to pay a premium for one brand versus another. It's just a logo. Why are you buying? It's because the story makes you feel better. I've been in a locker room where I saw a man who was 500 pounds if he was an ounce. And he was struggling to put on that tight shirt. But you know what? I'm not mocking him, because he was there to better himself, to work out and to get in shape.
Yeah.
And he put on that shirt. It was clinging to dear life. He got it on. And when he put that Under Armour shirt, he stood a bit straighter. His back, he felt better. And if you had gotten a tight shirt from any other 100 brands, probably making the same factory, it wouldn't have had the same impact. It was a story that was told by the brand that resonated inside of him. And he felt stronger. He felt better. He was equipped to go out into that gym and tackle it and better himself because of how that story made him feel.
He probably looked good too. Looked better.
He looked pretty.
Say he made the Kool-Aid, remember?
I was going to say, I felt like I was in a new in-store launch, lined up with the other staff. I knew the brand.
We're all
old.
Under Armour ambassadors now.
Old habits die hard.
I'm curious, flipping the script a little bit, and maybe this is something, Renee, you can start with, is what do Chinese brands or Asian brands in general get wrong when they try to come into the US? Is there something you see consistently?
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides get it wrong 100%, right? And there's so many examples of that. And some of it is little things, right? Silly things, like you'll see translations of things where, and you'd see this both ways, from like Chinese to English, English to Chinese. Chinese is a very flowery language. There's a lot of adjectives, a lot of long things that go together. You put that in and all of a sudden you have a makeup that's called, glimmering in the sunshine, bronze eyeshadow for blah, 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 like the mountains or something. And you're like, okay, that doesn't work in America, right? Technically it's English, but it's like, it's off, right? I have a huge bugaboo about Chinese fonts with English language.
Yes.
It drives me crazy. So the way that
so unattractive.
there's certain fonts that you use for Chinese, which work great for Chinese, but if you put English in them, it looks off, and it will just always look off. So some of it's little stuff like that. Like I worked with a brand once, it was a beauty brand, and all their backgrounds were like these very ornate things. And all the magazines in the US were like, I just want a white background with a plain PDP. Like, I don't want that kind of stuff. So some of it's little stuff. Some of it's big stuff, which is cultural misses, right? Like things like we talked about, like the Lululemon, and there's about a gajillion examples of foreign brands going into China doing that. China, I think they're still figuring their way out coming into the US. I think the ones that have done really well is Shein, which has obviously had a lot of ups and downs around sustainability and how they handle that. You've got people like Temu, you got Labubu, which is probably honestly the best success case of anyone that's come in, which is just insane. You've got Florasis, you've got so many other ones. So I think we're still seeing the effect of how this is coming into the US. I think some of them are coming in very Chinese, and then some of them are coming in, you almost barely know they're Chinese, like DJI, right? Which is basically does all of the drones as a Chinese company. Anchors, Charging is Chinese company. Like you don't even think of them as being Chinese, to be honest, because they're just turned into global brands. They do quite a good job. Other ones, they're Chinese. So it's kind of, I think they're still going through the process of figuring that stuff out. But I think you have to go through all of these lessons. And there's probably more examples of American brands screwing it up in China than the vice versa, but we're still early in the process. So I think there will be a lot of missteps.
I think, not to be controversial, but I'll do it anyway, Deanne and Barney. But Renee, first of all, thank you for talking about the font, because that does drive me crazy. The kerning, the space, it just doesn't look right.
I can't stand it. Yeah.
It drives me. You can see it all the
You
time.
see it immediately as soon as you see it.
Someone's got to
Oh,
say
God.
something about it. But
Yeah.
one of the things, so I'm ethnically Chinese, right? I'm Chinese, but a lot of speak Chinese. I love China. My parents are from Burma. They were not from China. My dad's never been. My mom went one time on a tourist trip. So they've never been to China. And I can see from having parents who were raised in British Catholic schools in Burma, from having tremendous people in my life and community from India, what they do is they assimilate so well into the West because of the legacy of colonialism. Because of the legacy of colonialism, the people in those countries, the colonized countries, were, and the obvious ills of colonialism aside, but the after effect was that people were exposed to Western culture. My parents grew up watching Sean Connery, listening to Elvis Presley. You were steeped in Western culture, which meant when they moved to America, it was pretty much a cinch for them to get along. They already spoke English fluently, that was their first language. They already understood the culture. They could make cultural references, they could get along. China has never been conquered. China's been around for 5,000 years, its own culture. So a lot of the Chinese may speak perfect English, they do. They're incredibly brilliant, intelligent, far more than I could ever dream. But when they come to the West, they don't have the same understanding. A lot of the references are different. A lot of the basic assumptions you make about life, the way you talk about it. And we see some of this with the little bits of insight that your consultants will often give you, like hand someone a business card with two hands, or the idea that what's a real man in America is a strong guy, a tough guy. Look in the eye, firm handshake, very firm handshake, look in the eye. That's a real man. If I give you a limp handshake, but don't look in the eye, bit of a milquetoast, a bit of a whimper, something's going on there, right? You don't trust a man like that in America. But in China, a real gentleman conceals his strength. A real gentleman doesn't need to look in the eye and be challenging and be aggressive. He'll look down a bit. He won't squeeze your hands so tightly. It's strength and gentleness, strength and restraint. But to an American, if you talk to a Chinese guy, he doesn't look in the eye, doesn't grip your hand so tightly, you think, what's wrong with this guy? And from the other side, and I've seen it, Americans come in, hey, what's up, man? And they think, the Chinese like, my God, what a barbarian, It's these little things, but they're the cross-cultural. And so when it comes to translating the U.S. market, yes, they don't always understand. What plays to a Chinese audience is not going to play to the American.
What do you think about timing? How does a business tell when it's time, when it's a good time to expand, when it's a bad time to expand? Is there something in a business that tells you that you have a chance of succeeding, or it's too soon?
I think there's maybe a couple things, right? One is, I would say, the size of the market that you're in, right? So for instance, the US is a large market. Most brands for the US that expand outside of the borders have gotten to a pretty decent size by the time they go to expand, because there's kind of no point. Like if you've got so much to grow in your own market, there's no point to waste your time going to these other markets, right? On the flip side, when you see, say, a European, like an Irish company or a British company, they're going to expand a lot faster because they have a smaller market at home, right? So for them, it makes sense to go to the big market. I just need to go to the US and get there because it's larger. So I think part of it is based on the size of your market at home. I think the next part would be based on, is there any demand in the target country? Because starting from zero and getting no demand whatsoever is very, very difficult to do. Some good examples I've seen in China is like Tory Burch, right? Tory Burch got super popular in China. Why? Gossip Girl. Gossip Girl brought her into it. There's certain things that will just all of a sudden, or maybe there's just a weird trend that's happening, or maybe there's a competitor that's doing really well, but you need some demand signal that there's some percolating demand for some reason, whether it's for your brand or whether it's an ancillary brand, but there's some indication that there's real potential there. Because if you just go and say, like, I'm going to go there and I'm just going to push, and how many times have we heard, like, there's 1 billion people in China, if I just sell it to 100 million of them, I got a market. It's not that simple. It's very complicated. And then the third one I'd say is budget. The number one problem I see people go into other markets is they put too low of a budget, and then they just languish. They kind of get there, they get a little bit of sales, but they're never really able to break even. They don't want to pull, and they just sit there for a long time. And it's just because it's expensive. Like, it's not cheap to go into a new market. You don't know things. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to build the brand. So I think the main mistake I see people do is they put budget, but just not enough.
Well, and that's interesting because, Marcus, you were speaking to localization and connecting with community and getting the brand to really experience that culture as it's coming over, or even before it's coming over, and getting signals. And you've got a budget for that. You must have had a certain percentage that you either asked for in advance or demanded after the fact that you needed. Could you speak to that?
You got to go through all the couch cushions at headquarters to find the change, to do that. But, it's very true. The capital deficit is huge. I agree with everything Renee said. It was perfect. I mean, it's very true. For a lot of the companies in Europe, for example, you want to go abroad because at a certain point, your home market cannot be your only market because there's no space for it to grow. The market is not large enough here to achieve the ambitions that you want to do. So you have to go And often you have to go to the country that has the greatest volume and velocity of capital. And that will always be, at least for the foreseeable future, the United States of America. At the same time, China, billion people. Everyone just bought one item, you'd be golden. But what people don't realize is, again, we talk about China as some monolith, and it's far from that. And the consumers in China are incredibly savvy, especially young people, just like here. They're chronically online. They follow everything. They monitor everything. They know you cannot snow them. But the other side of the world doesn't mean that much because they can use the internet, they can use AI, they can use translation software. They understand if you're selling them a bill of goods. They understand if your brand, it used to be that if it came from the West, that meant something. Yeah, there's exactly, you get away. There's some glamour. They can go on the internet and figure out in 2 seconds that you're nobody in your home market.
Right.
There's no cachet attached to you. And you're trying to sell to us? No, thank you. And so the most important thing, in my opinion, is you have to be successful in your own home market first. Show the traction. And if you want to go from a retail perspective into another market, say China, you have to build your brand equity. You have to offer something very special that people, like I said, Dean, people couldn't wait for Target. They wanted to see something they couldn't get in their own home market, something that was cool, had a great story around it. They were eager for that brand to come over.
Yeah.
You have to have that story. You have to have that equity. Otherwise, there are a million better capitalized, better adaptable, more agile brands in the country that can eat your lunch.
If you were a retailer considering this, what would you say as a first move? This is a tough question because I know a lot of retailers get this wrong, but what would be a good starting point for getting into the expansion conversation?
I have different answers depending on what country you're going into, right? So for instance, for any brand that's considering going into China or Asia, the thing I tell them first is do it in your home market, right? There's a huge Chinese diaspora and Asian diaspora in the United States and in Europe. Lots of students, lots of tourists, lots of people who've moved around, and there are influencers there. There are people who can kind of help you and get a better understanding, like test it there. Is it working? Is it bring people into your store? Is it something that's resonating with people? You've got, Little Red Book is a big social media trend that's happening within the Chinese community. There are Little Red Book influencers in every city around the world. So bring them in, have them write about your store, talk about it, have them do a party, start to engage with the community before you go and decide, like, I'm going to go all the way across the world and try to do things. So I think it used to be cross-border e-com was a way to do it. But I think depending on your sector, that can be kind of tricky. It is better when you have something you can work with, when you can bring them into a store and you can show them product, not just talking about a theory. I think for something like going into the US, it's maybe a little bit of a different strategy around that. With the US, I would say one of the things that's a little bit different with China, for instance, is the wholesale market's quite small. There's barely any wholesale market. It's all single brand retail, and it's mostly done via franchise or self-run operated. But you don't have Nordstrom's, you don't have Macy's, like you don't have any of these sort of curators. The US has that, right? So I think if you're a brand and you can find any partners, I always think it's great to do something with a partner first. That could be a product collaboration. It could be selling within a wholesale store. It could be doing pop-ups, doesn't have to be anything crazy, but find somebody who's already there, who's got the connection, who's in the community, and start there. And the US, you can do some e-com. I think you can do cross-border e-com going into the United States because there is influencers. There's a lot you can do around that. So I think the US, to be honest, is a lot easier to enter. It still takes time. It still takes more effort to do it, but there are more holds that you can do, whether that's partners, whether that's other areas. China, I almost think it's better to start where you are first before you go because it's very different.
I agree with all that from Renee. I think that both markets are great, but my legal training comes out here. I want to say it depends. It depends on, for me, I would say it depends on also your sector. Are you in lifestyle? Are you in sportswear? What are you exactly doing? Are you in beauty? Are you in wellness, longevity?
Yeah.
Because food, because we come to say beauty, wellness, longevity. Well, there are so many different paths to success you can pursue in China. You've got a great potential of really being successful in that country, whereas other areas, maybe less so. Are you in a highly regulated sector? Retail, probably not so much an issue, but in some of the other sectors we work with, you've got highly regulated things.
Yeah.
But if you're going to the US, you're going to China, we work with a company that was AI-enabled technology for healthcare. Wonderful technology, really great. It was very preventative, but without violating privacy. It was great. And they wanted to go into the United States. And I said, this is a wonderful technology. It's absolutely fantastic. Guess what? There's no way on earth that it's going to get in the United States. You're collecting very sensitive personal health information of patients, and you're sending that back to a database in China. And with the political winds the way they are right now, that is, you want to fly, At the same time, that opens up the possibility of European companies doing similar things going into China. So I tell a lot of European companies in highly regulated sectors, if you're doing something that is comparable to your Chinese peers with their barred from the market, this is your opportunity to come in. We'll shape that path.
One of the reasons why they're so far ahead on transactions and payments is because of those privacy issues. So they're able to process more effectively.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'd say too is just how competitive is the industry that you're going into, right? And one of the things that you see, I think in Europe a lot, you'll see a brand that's big in their home market, right? Maybe they're big in France, maybe they're big in Ireland, they're big in the UK. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to go into the US. And they go into the US and say you're a beauty brand. Well, there's like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of beauty brands in the US. So what do you really have that's that different than what everybody else has? It's a crowded market. You really need something different. Just because you're great in your home market doesn't mean it's going to work in the US. The same thing we'd see from like people going to China. So I think especially when you're going into a large market, you've got to look at like what is unique about you and can you compete in that? Because it's just like the scale of things and the number of competitors, it's harder. You have more people to go up against. So you really do have to stand out.
Are there countries that are starting to become attractive for opening business that weren't previously attractive? Is there a shifting sand as far as countries that are becoming popular for expanding business into?
I would say one thing I'm seeing in Europe is Ireland is probably a country that is, gaining more and more market share from that. Part of it is because of Brexit, so people used to go to the UK and now they go into Ireland because of EU. Their government is quite open with incentives. And so I think pretty much every tech company going into Europe is going in through Ireland. You've got Google, you've got Meta, you've got all the pharmaceutical companies. So I think Ireland is a good example of a country that is making themselves more and more attractive and taking advantage of some of these areas. It's funny because coming from the US, I sometimes think like, oh, probably nobody wants to go in the US. Everyone still wants to go in the US. Like it still doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter the tariffs, doesn't matter all this stuff. I've got so many European companies setting up companies in the US. So I do think the US continues to be a pretty attractive place for, most countries to go and start a company and enter.
What stuff, Renee? There's nothing going on. Everything's going great. I mean, it's a wonderful place. But it's true that despite all the headlines, despite everything that's going on, inception of what's going on, both the reality and the perception, is that the United States of America is still the most desirable market for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone feels like no matter how well we've done in Ireland or China or the UK or whatever it is, I haven't made it, so I've made it in America. Until my brand is in America, until I've raised American money, captured American consumers, and I think that's going to last for a long time. And that's still the case. Everybody wants to go there and they want to find a way in. And what we caution people is, as Renee said earlier, make sure you know your customer, you know your market, who are your competitors, what is your unfair advantage, what is your edge, and realize that in America, because of its size, because of its capital, because of its dynamism and innovation, you are going to find hundreds, if not thousands of competitors in your segment. And if you can't do it better than them, then you won't have a chance. That being said, there is a tremendous opportunity because I think a lot of companies, innovation tech, and brands in Europe are under-leveraged. They're undervalued compared to their peers in the United States who might be overvalued. And there's tremendous opportunity for arbitrage when you come cross-border into the United States market.
It's still the case, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any last advice you'd give to a business?
I think the one thing I would say is I think to plan in advance much longer than you think you need to, right? I think it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of preparation to decide the process of whether you want to go into a new market or not. And sometimes I've seen brands start the process and decide not to. And sometimes that's the right decision, right? So I think it's not like you're going to do it and tomorrow you're going to be in there and it's going to go. I mean, plan, I think at least a year in advance, if not longer, for some of these bigger market moves, and start the process early and get a better sense of like what really is the demand for your product there. Is it really worth your time to do it? And I think that takes some forethought and some research.
I don't want to go Nike because I'm Under Armour, but just do it. You got to just do it. You have to look at, I think the world is your oyster. If you're a company, you've got something special, you've got something, a story worth telling, a product worth selling, and people like what you've sold so far, and you want growth, don't be afraid to go abroad. Don't be afraid to take your products in other markets, especially in Europe. Don't be afraid to go into America or China or anywhere else. Yes, you do have to take a very strong look at your fundamentals, look at your numbers, look at your potential competitors, all those things you'd have to do anyway. But there are a lot of people, I think, out of fear, they say, yes, it would be nice to go to America one day, but I'm not there yet. I'll do it someday. And as Tom Cruise has told us, someday is a dangerous word because it really means never. So take a strong look. Don't be afraid. You can do it.
That's awesome. Well, how do people reach you? Because I think They really should. You guys are the dream team as far as expansion goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think reach out on LinkedIn. My company's website is www.clasolutions.com. And Marcus, do you want to give yours?
Yes, I'm www.coda, C-O-D-A, Coda Global Ventures, and I'm Marcus at codaglobalventures.com. You can reach us on LinkedIn. And yeah, I think that we'd be so happy to see more companies achieving success abroad.
And we'll have all of this on our show notes as well on our website. So thank you so much. This has been fascinating.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been great.